The sun was setting on the alien planet of Zeros, casting an eerie orange glow over the barren wasteland. The ground was covered in debris from the recent battle, where alien ships had crashed and military machines lay scattered in pieces. The once thriving world was now a desolate battlefield. Smoke rose into the air from the wreckage, the scent of burned metal and charred earth filling the atmosphere. There was no sound except the distant rumble of explosions and the occasional whirring of a hovering drone as it searched for survivors. Amidst this chaos, a lone figure lay motionless on the ground. A young alien girl, her body battered and bruised, was sprawled across the sand. She was wearing a sleek combat suit designed for battle, but it was torn and stained with blood. Her breathing was shallow, her eyes closed in unconsciousness, and the only sign of life was the faint rise and fall of her chest. She had been abandoned by her people, left for dead in the middle of the wreckage. The girl was not just any ordinary alien. She was from a royal family, a member of the ruling caste of her species. But now, none of that mattered. Her life, once full of privilege and respect, had been reduced to a mere struggle for survival. She had been caught in the crossfire of a violent war between her people and a rival alien faction. During the chaos, her ship had been destroyed, and she had been separated from her guards and fellow soldiers. The battlefield had turned into a massacre, with no one around to help her. The alien girl's body was covered in fresh wounds, deep cuts that marred her pale blue skin. Her leg was bent at an unnatural angle, and a deep gash ran down her arm. Her once beautiful face was now streaked with dirt and blood, her silver hair matted and tangled. She looked as though she had been forgotten by the world, discarded like a piece of debris. Her life seemed to be slipping away as no one came to her aid. As the evening grew darker, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed in the distance. A human soldier, wearing the distinctive armor of a field medic, moved cautiously through the wreckage. His armor was battered from the previous skirmishes, and his face was tense with focus. He had been part of a search and rescue team deployed to recover any survivors from the ongoing war. His mission was simple: find the wounded, treat them, and get them to safety. But he had never imagined that his path would cross with an alien princess lying in the midst of devastation. The soldier's name was Captain Thomas. He had been trained to handle the worst of battlefields, to face death and destruction without flinching. But when his eyes landed on the young alien girl lying on the ground, something inside him stopped. His instincts told him to keep moving, to focus on the mission, to avoid getting caught in anything too dangerous. But there was something about the girl, her stillness, her vulnerability, that tugged at his heart. She wasn't just another casualty of war. She was someone who needed help, someone who couldn't survive on her own. He approached her cautiously, scanning the area for any signs of danger. His heart raced as he knelt beside her, checking for any signs of life. He could feel her faint pulse under his fingers, but it was weak, barely noticeable. Her wounds were serious, and there was no time to waste. Captain Thomas's mind raced as he considered his options. His training told him to treat the wounded, to save those who could be saved. But he knew that saving an alien girl, especially one from the enemy, could be seen as a betrayal. The war between humans and the aliens was brutal. Every encounter was a life or death struggle, and no one could be trusted. Helping an alien would make him a traitor in the eyes of his own people. But the girl's condition was dire, and he knew she wouldn't last much longer if he didn't act quickly. As the medic's thoughts raced, the wind picked up, sending a chill through the air. He could hear the distant hum of alien ships still, searching for survivors, and the sound of approaching footsteps grew louder. Time was running out. With no choice but to act, Captain Thomas carefully lifted the girl into his arms, cradling her like she was a fragile doll. Her body was limp and unresponsive, and every moment felt like a lifetime. His heart pounded in his chest as he realized how dangerous his decision was. He glanced around the wreckage, looking for any sign of shelter, any place where he could hide her from the alien soldiers who might still be patrolling the area. The battlefield was vast, and there was no guarantee that he would be able to get away unnoticed. But there was no turning back now. The girl needed him, and he had made his choice. With one last look at the wreckage that surrounded them, Captain Thomas began to move, his footsteps quick and silent as he carried the wounded girl towards a small abandoned shelter in the distance. His mind was filled with doubt, but he knew there was no going back. He had to save her, even if it meant risking his life. The alien girl, once a symbol of power and privilege, was now in the hands of a human medic. The future of both their worlds seemed uncertain. But in that moment, Captain Thomas knew one thing for sure. He couldn't let her die. Not like this. Not when there was still hope. As they moved through the wreckage, the medic's heart heavy with the weight of his decision, he could only wonder, would saving this alien girl change the course of the war? Would it bring peace? Or would it lead to even greater conflict? All he knew was that for now he had to protect her. He had to make sure she survived. The journey had just begun, and both of their lives were hanging by a thread. The medic's actions would soon have far-reaching consequences, but for now his focus was simple: to get the wounded alien girl to safety and keep her alive. Little did he know, this was only the beginning of a story that would challenge the very fabric of the universe itself. Captain Thomas moved swiftly through the broken landscape, his heart pounding in his chest as he cradled the alien girl in his arms. Her body was limp, her breathing shallow and faint. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of the decision he had made was pressing down on him with each passing moment. The wreckage around them seemed endless, a sea of twisted metal, shattered glass, and ruined machinery. It was a graveyard of war, and he was now carrying the life of one of his enemies. The wind howled through the desolate ruins, carrying with it the scent of burning debris and the faint crackle of distant explosions. The sky above was filled with dark clouds, casting an ominous shadow over the battlefield. The air was thick with the smell of destruction, and the sounds of the ongoing conflict echoed in the distance. Despite the chaos around him, Captain Thomas's mind was focused entirely on the girl in his arms. He could feel her weak pulse against his chest, a reminder of the fragile thread between life and death. Every time he heard a distant noise, his heart skipped a beat. He knew that any moment now alien patrols could find them. They would kill him on sight for daring to help an enemy. But he couldn't abandon her. Not now. Not after everything he had seen in her eyes, the pain, the fear, and the silent plea for help. As he moved forward, his thoughts raced. What had driven him to make this decision? Was it compassion? Or was it something deeper? His training had always taught him to think logically, to act decisively and without hesitation. But this was different. He wasn't just making a choice for survival. He was choosing to protect an enemy, someone who, if the roles were reversed, would have likely done the same to him. But something inside him refused to walk away from this. He couldn't leave her to die alone on this desolate battlefield. He reached a small outcrop of ruined stone that had once been part of a larger structure. It provided a little shelter from the wind, and it looked like the perfect place to hide, for a while. The shelter was only a temporary hiding place, but it would have to do. He crouched down carefully, placing the alien girl on the ground and checking her wounds again. The deep gash on her leg was still bleeding, and her arm was broken in multiple places. He pulled out his medical kit, his hands shaking as he worked quickly to clean and bandage her injuries. His mind kept returning to the question, what if they were caught? What if the alien soldiers found them before he could finish treating her? What if his actions were considered treasonous, and he was left to face the consequences alone? He knew the risks of helping her were immense, but at that moment none of that mattered. He had made a choice, and now he had to see it through. As he worked, the girl stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She looked around, confused and disoriented, her hand instinctively reaching for her side. The medic froze, his breath catching in his throat. The girl's eyes met his, and for a brief moment, there was a shared understanding between them. She didn't speak, but her gaze was full of gratitude and wonder. She had been abandoned by her own people, left to die in the middle of a battlefield. And now, here she was, saved by a human, someone who should have been her enemy. Easy, Captain Thomas murmured softly, trying to comfort her. You're safe for now. The girl didn't respond, but she nodded weakly, her gaze never leaving his. She understood that he had risked his life for her, just as she understood that this moment of safety was fleeting. She knew the consequences of being found by her people. In her world, failure meant death, and failure was something her people did not tolerate. But this human soldier had chosen to defy the odds and save her. In a way, he had given her a second chance at life. Captain Thomas couldn't help but wonder about the girl's story. What was she doing on the battlefield? Why was she abandoned? Was she truly an enemy, or was there more to the story than he understood? He had been trained to see the aliens as the enemy, to fight them without question. But now, standing over this girl, seeing the pain in her eyes, he began to question everything. Who were the real enemies here? Was it the soldiers on the battlefield, or was it the war itself? The wind picked up again, sending a chill through the air. Captain Thomas stood up and glanced around, scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. He had to keep moving. The alien soldiers would not stop until they found her, and he had no idea how long they had until the patrols arrived. The thought of leaving the girl behind crossed his mind again, but this time, it wasn't a thought he could entertain. He had made his choice, and he couldn't turn back now. The medic grabbed his weapon and checked his communicator, ensuring that his team was still in contact. It was a risky decision, but he had no other option. He had to keep the girl alive. He had to protect her at all costs. He glanced at her one last time before picking her up again, carefully adjusting her position in his arms. "Stay with me," he whispered. The girl didn't speak, but she nodded faintly, her eyes filled with trust and determination. The bond between them was formed in that moment, two beings from different worlds united by an act of mercy in the face of war. With the girl now safely in his arms, Captain Thomas set off again, his path uncertain, his future unclear. The odds were against them. But for now, all that mattered was that they were alive, together. And he would do whatever it took to keep her that way. As they moved forward, the human medic couldn't help but wonder, was this the moment that would change everything? Would the future of both their worlds be shaped by this one decision? He didn't know the answers, but one thing was certain. He would fight for this alien girl as if his own life depended on it. Because in that moment, it did. The sun had long since set, and the eerie glow of distant fires cast an unnatural light across the battlefield. The wind was cold, cutting through the wreckage of what was once a thriving military base. Captain Thomas had found a small abandoned structure, a half-destroyed bunker hidden in the shadow of a crumbled wall. Inside, the walls were cracked, and the air smelled of old metal and smoke. It wasn't much, but it was enough for now. The alien girl, whose name Thomas still didn't know, lay on a makeshift cot he'd fashioned from the remnants of broken equipment. Her body was still weak, but her eyes were open now, alert, and filled with quiet intelligence. Her deep blue skin, marked by scars from the battle, contrasted with her silver hair that had once shone brightly. Now it was matted and tangled like the girl herself, a warrior cast aside in a brutal world. Her breathing was steady, but the pain was clear in her eyes. Thomas knew that he couldn't keep her hidden forever, and soon they would have to face whatever was coming for them. He sat beside her, trying to apply a salve to her broken arm, his hands steady despite the chaos of his thoughts. This wasn't just a rescue mission anymore. It had become something else, something more personal. He had saved her, but now he was responsible for her survival. Her fate was in his hands, and the responsibility weighed heavily on his conscience. "Dowie, you understand me?" Thomas asked softly, his voice low but filled with the same urgency that had driven him to save her. The girl gave a slight nod, her dark eyes never leaving his. It was a small confirmation, but it was enough. At least they were communicating, even if the language barrier was an obstacle. There was a brief moment of silence between them. Then, the sound of distant footsteps shattered the stillness of the night. Thomas's heart skipped a beat. He stood up immediately, moving to the doorway, his weapon in hand. The alien girl's eyes widened in fear, and for the first time since he had found her, she seemed truly frightened. The enemy was closing in. He crouched low and peered through the cracks in the wall. His breath caught when he saw what he feared. A small patrol of alien soldiers, armed and cautious, were walking through the wreckage, their heavy boots crunching on the sand. The patrol was moving in his direction. They were only a few hundred yards away. It was only a matter of time before they would discover the shelter. Thomas's mind raced. He needed to act fast. He looked back at the girl who was now sitting up, her eyes wide with panic. There was no time to explain the danger. He had to get them out of there, but how? His escape routes were limited, and the shelter they were hiding in was exposed, vulnerable. If the patrols saw the slightest movement, it would be all over. There you go. Medic took a deep breath and moved swiftly toward the girl. "We need to go," he whispered urgently. "Stay close." He helped her to her feet, supporting her as she struggled to stand. Her leg, though bandaged, was still badly injured, and she winced in pain with each step. Thomas held her steady, guiding her towards the back of the shelter, where a small crawl space led out into the open. He had no plan other than to move, quickly and quietly. As they moved, the sound of the patrol grew louder, their voices muffled in the distance. Thomas's heart raced as he crouched low, pulling the girl with him. He had to keep her safe, no matter what. The thought of being caught filled him with dread. He had no idea what would happen to them if the aliens found them, but he knew it wouldn't be good. He would be branded a traitor, and she would be captured or worse. They reached the crawl space, and Thomas helped the girl slip through first. He followed close behind, moving quickly but carefully. The ground was uneven, and the weight of his own body and the girl's growing weakness slowed them down. Every moment felt like an eternity as the sound of the patrol grew louder. They were getting closer. Just as they neared the end of the crawl space, a loud voice from the patrol echoed in the distance. The sound sent a chill down Thomas's spine. They were almost there. But then a soft sound, like the faint crackle of a twig breaking, pierced the air. Thomas froze, his breath catching in his throat. It was too late. The alien patrol had heard them. "Stay down," Thomas hissed, pulling the girl close to him. They were trapped in the crawl space, unable to move without making noise. He had no choice but to stay still, holding his breath as the soldiers drew nearer. His hands were clenched around the weapon, ready to fight if necessary, but the odds were against them. He didn't have enough ammo to take down the entire patrol, and his chances of surviving a firefight were slim. He could hear the alien soldiers talking, their language foreign and harsh, but one word stood out to him: intruders. The patrol was searching for them. Thomas's heart pounded in his chest, and he could feel the girl trembling beside him. Her fear was palpable, and he could feel the weight of it in his own bones. They couldn't stay hidden forever. They had to move. The sound of footsteps grew louder as the soldiers neared the crawl space. Every second felt like an eternity. And then, just as the first soldier rounded the corner, something unexpected happened. A loud explosion erupted in the distance, shaking the ground beneath them. The patrol froze, their attention diverted for a split second. It was a diversion. The noise had come from one of the human rescue teams that Thomas had been in contact with. They had launched an attack to buy him time. "Now," Thomas whispered urgently, grabbing the girl's hand and pulling her forward. With his heart racing, he knew they had only one chance to escape. If they didn't move now, they would be trapped. They crawled as fast as they could through the narrow tunnel, the sounds of the explosion still ringing in their ears. The patrol was disoriented, but they were still out there, still hunting for them. Thomas had no idea where the escape would lead, but he was willing to take the risk. Every step felt like it might be their last. But Captain Thomas knew one thing, for certain: he would protect this girl with everything he had, no matter the cost. The world around them was filled with chaos. The sounds of distant explosions and gunfire echoed in the air, reverberating off the crumbled remnants of buildings and machinery. Thomas, holding the alien girl firmly in his arms, sprinted across the rocky terrain. His breath came in sharp gasps as he fought to keep his footing on the uneven ground. His heart was pounding, but it wasn't just fear that fueled him. It was the desperate need to keep her safe, no matter what it cost him. The girl, though still weak, was now more alert. Her pale blue skin was streaked with dirt and blood, her silver hair wild and tangled, but her eyes were filled with something else, a new resolve. She wasn't just a helpless victim anymore. She was a fighter, and for the first time since Thomas had found her on the battlefield, she was willing to fight for her survival. Together, they had become more than just two lost souls trying to survive. They had become allies bound by the unspoken bond of mercy and survival. "Keep going," Thomas urged, his voice low but firm. "We're almost there." The shelter he had originally planned to take them to was now a distant memory. The path ahead was unclear, but it didn't matter. They couldn't stop. Not now. Every moment they wasted was a moment closer to being caught. His military instincts kicked in. He knew he couldn't outrun the enemy for long, especially not with the girl's injuries slowing her down. They had to make it to the extraction point. There was no other choice. Suddenly, they reached a narrow canyon, the jagged rocks on either side offering a sliver of cover. Thomas paused for a moment, trying to steady his breathing. He peered over the edge of the canyon, looking for signs of life. The distant hum of the alien soldiers' hovercrafts was growing louder, signaling that the patrols were closing in. He had to make a choice. "We need to take cover," Thomas said, his voice tight. "Stay close." But the girl, though still in pain, shook her head. She placed her hand on his arm, her fingers weak but insistent. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, everything else seemed to fall away. She had something to say, but her words were foreign to him. Still, the message was clear. The medic, understanding her determination, nodded. They couldn't stay hidden forever. The alien soldiers were closing in and time was running out. "All right," he whispered. "We'll make a stand." They moved quickly into the canyon, the rocks providing some shelter as the shadows grew, longer with the setting sun. The girl's breathing was labored, but she was still determined to fight. As they reached the narrowest part of the canyon, Thomas took a deep breath. They were close now, so close to the extraction point. But he could hear the soldiers now. Their footsteps were closer than ever. The distant hum of their hovering vehicles grew louder, and then it came. The unmistakable sound of boots crunching against the gravel. They were almost here. Thomas gripped his weapon, his knuckles turning white. He turned to the girl, his voice low but firm. "Stay behind me," he ordered, preparing to fight. But just as he was about to make his move, something unexpected happened. The girl, this alien who had once been a symbol of the enemy, stood beside him. She raised her hand, silently signaling him to wait. She looked at him with such intensity that it took a moment for him to realize what she was about to do. The girl, weak as she was, pulled something from beneath her torn armor, a small device, no larger than a communicator. She pressed it to her chest, a quiet hum filling the air. Thomas's eyes widened. He had no idea what it was, but he could feel its energy. Whatever this device was, it was something powerful, something dangerous. Before he could ask, the girl turned to face, her expression determined. She had made a choice, one that Thomas wasn't sure he could understand. She was going to fight. Not just for her survival, but for him too. Just as the alien patrol rounded the corner, their weapons raised, the girl activated the device. A bright, blinding light flashed from the device, enveloping the entire canyon in a surge of energy. The air crackled with static, and Thomas shielded his eyes from the light. It was as if time had frozen for a moment. The alien soldiers stopped dead in their tracks, their eyes wide with disbelief. Their weapons dropped to the ground, forgotten. In that split second, the world seemed to shift. The girl, weakened but unwavering, stepped forward. "You are too late," she said, her voice clear and powerful, despite the injuries she had sustained. Her words, though in her alien tongue, carried an undeniable force. Thomas understood enough to know she wasn't just speaking to him. She was speaking to the soldiers who had once been her own people. The soldiers hesitated, their fear palpable. They were frozen in place, caught between their orders and the mysterious power this alien girl possessed. Thomas watched in awe as the girl's hand extended toward them, her fingers glowing with a light that seemed to come from within her very soul. It was as though she had unlocked something ancient, something far beyond her years. "Leave us," she commanded, her voice booming in the narrow canyon. It was an order, a command that even the fiercest of warriors couldn't ignore. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the soldiers, terrified and confused, began to retreat, their eyes never leaving the girl who had once been their princess. They didn't fight back. They didn't shoot. They simply turned and fled into the distance, disappearing into the smoke of the battlefield. Thomas stood there frozen, his heart racing in his chest. He had witnessed something extraordinary. The girl had saved them. She had turned the tide of the battle with nothing more than the power of her will and the strength of her spirit. The girl, now visibly exhausted, collapsed into his arms. Her body, once so full of energy and power, was now spent. The device she had used had drained her. She was weak but alive. "You did it," Thomas whispered, his voice filled with awe. "You saved us." The girl smiled faintly, her eyes closing in exhaustion. She had done the unthinkable, and in doing so had proven that sometimes true power lay not in weapons or technology, but in the willingness to act with compassion, courage, and a willingness to sacrifice. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the war-torn world around them seemed a little less bleak. The future was uncertain, but in that moment, one human medic and one alien princess had changed the course of their lives, and the fate of their worlds, forever.